Bryan Danielson's retirements at the hands of The Shield. Bryan Danielson's career as a full-time wrestler has come to an end, marking a historic turning point in the world of professional wrestling. And for a long time now, he's been regarded as one of the best wrestlers in the world. If there's anyone or anything to associate him with, it's one of the most legendary stables in wrestling, The Shield. Curiously, Bryan's last matches in WWE, as well as his last match as a full-time wrestler, were against each member of The Shield, losing to each of them. His last match in Raw was against Seth Rollins. His last match in SmackDown and WWE was against our tribal chief, Roman Reigns. And his final match as a full-time wrestler was against Jon Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose. Incredible, right? Today we'll review these three matches, and I'll give you the context of each. Welcome to a new video. Before we start, I'd like to thank the channel members for sponsoring this video. Love you all. We're few, but we're wild. If you also want to become a member, you can do so for just 9 pesos. Remember, I'm always hungry, but if not, a simple subscription helps a lot. With all that said, let's get started and dive into this video with Bryan's last match on Monday Raw at the hands of The Shield's first member, Seth Rollins. Let's go back to 2019. At that time, Raw's ratings were plummeting. NBC told WWE, "What's going on?" Meanwhile, Fox was pressuring Vince McMahon because they wanted Roman Reigns on SmackDown, no matter what. But back then, Roman Reigns was a Raw guy. WWE's response to these issues was to create the wildcard rule, a rule pulled out of nowhere, allowing certain Raw superstars to appear on SmackDown and vice versa. It was a horrible decision, since it was always the same wrestlers, and we'd see them every week. But anyway, that year, Seth Rollins was the Universal Champion after defeating Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. The Beast Incarnate had won the Money in the Bank briefcase and wanted his title back, while Baron Corbin was the #1 contender for Seth's title. The two had already faced each other at Super Showdown, but Corbin wanted a rematch with a special referee at Stomping Grounds, and he was looking for who that would be. So with this context, during the June 17th episode of Raw, as part of the wildcard rule, WWE announced a match between Rollins and Daniel Bryan. Bryan appeared with his tag partner giving a promo saying that the McMahons brought him from SmackDown to elevate the show, calling Raw trash and insulting the people of Los Angeles. He claimed that he alone would prove he's better than the entire Raw roster by destroying Rollins. Later, when asked if he was ready to face a paranoid Rollins, who had been knocking out all potential special referees for Corbin, Bryan confidently said yes. The match started with some back-and-forth moves until Rowan interfered, attacking Seth, leading to a disqualification. Bryan and Rowan continued attacking Rollins, but soon, the New Day showed up, and out of nowhere, a huge brawl erupted. The Usos, Kevin Owens, and others joined in. Chaos ensued. But eventually, everyone was cleared from the ring, leaving just Seth and Bryan. They announced that the match would be restarted with no interference allowed. The restarted match lasted almost 10 minutes, with Rollins winning after hitting a curb stomp. It was an entertaining but standard weekly show match, marking Bryan's last match on Monday Raw. Now, let's talk about Bryan's last match on Friday Night SmackDown at the hands of the second Shield member, Roman Reigns. Let's go back to 2021. 3 years ago. How time flies. At that time, there was a lot of talk about Bryan being unsure of his future, that he didn't have many years left as a professional wrestler, and wanted to make the most of his last run. But let me refresh your memory on what happened that year. At Elimination Chamber, Bryan won the chamber match, earning the right to face the Tribal Chief for the title that same night. He lost the match, though, since the American Dragon was too beat up after the chamber. After the match, Edge attacked Roman, choosing him as his opponent for WrestleMania. Bryan requested a rematch at Fastlane, arguing it wasn't fair to fight Roman right after an Elimination Chamber match, and Roman agreed. Before the match, Edge defeated Jey Uso to become the enforcer for Fastlane, essentially ensuring that the rules were followed. The match ended with Roman's victory after Edge attacked both men, leading to Bryan being added to the main event of WrestleMania, turning it into a triple threat match. What chaos they had back then. Roman retained his title in the grand event. Afterward, Cesaro wanted a title shot, but Roman mocked him, refusing to give him. Bryan stepped in to defend Cesaro, urging Roman to give him a chance since he defeated Rollins at WrestleMania. Roman refused, instead offering Bryan a shot, but with the condition that if Bryan lost, he had to leave SmackDown. Bryan accepted, and on April 30th, we witnessed Bryan's last match on SmackDown and in WWE, which he lost to the Tribal Chief. The match was great, featuring intense moves and Roman's ferocity. Notably, this match marked the debut of Roman's new entrance theme, Head of the Table, one of the best themes to this day. The story could have continued, but WWE handled it this way because Bryan was still undecided about his future, ultimately choosing not to renew with McMahon's company. Who would have thought that Roman Reigns would be his last opponent in WWE? What a coincidence. And why did this happen? Well, Bryan wanted to wrestle with talent from all over the world, something WWE wouldn't allow. He felt he had a few years left and wanted to make the most of them. Bryan even said in an interview that wrestling at WrestleMania made him feel empty, like he no longer belonged there, further cementing his desire to leave. Many factors led to Bryan leaving WWE and joining AEW. Speaking of AEW, let's finish this video by talking about Bryan Danielson's last match as a full-time wrestler against the last Shield member, Jon Moxley. Bryan's story in AEW is simple yet beautiful. He came to have fun, fulfill his dream of wrestling talent from all over the world, giving his 200% and delivering incredible matches. He suffered several injuries, but always fought through them to continue giving his all. In September 2023, during an episode of Collision, Bryan delivered a promo, revealing that he had promised his daughter he would retire from full-time wrestling when she turned 7. His priorities had changed. His daughter was 6 and would turn 7 in May 2024. So he announced that this would be his last year as a full-time wrestler. Time passed, the injuries piled up, and this time Bryan needed neck surgery, which had to happen no later than December 2024. Knowing he needed surgery, that he'd be out for a long time, that 2024 would be his final year as a full-time wrestler, and that his body had never been resilient enough to handle the physical toll of professional wrestling, Bryan got a shot at the AEW World Championship against Swerve Strickland. He capitalized on the opportunity, winning his first world title at AEW's grandest stage, All In. One of the most beautiful endings we've seen, and according to Bryan Danielson, the best match ending ever. But not everything was perfect. We all know that the title was given to Bryan as a thank you gesture, and because it was necessary to make him champion before he retired. His reign, due to his situation, was transitional and largely irrelevant, defending the title only against Jack Perry and losing it a month later to Jon Moxley. At Wrestle Dream, Bryan Danielson had his second title defense against a frustrated Jon Moxley, a match he lost via submission, shocking fans who had forgotten that a year earlier, Bryan said 2024 would be his last year as a full-time wrestler. They also ignored that Bryan would need to take a long break in December for his neck surgery. After this match, Moxley and the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club brutally attacked Bryan, sending him straight to the hospital and giving him a bittersweet farewell, thus ending his career as a full-time wrestler. Wow! Without a doubt, it's incredible how fate led each member of the Shield to retire Bryan from his respective brand or company. Seth from Raw, Roman from SmackDown and WWE, and Moxley from AEW. This is one of those once-in-a-lifetime coincidences. No one could have imagined it, not even Bryan himself. With this, we can say that Bryan Danielson, or Daniel Bryan, is eternally tied to the Shield. I'd love to hear you.
Some injuries, mentally and physically, studied them religiously so I don't repeat history. And people won't admit to me they don't want a victory bad enough to get a C. They'd rather just go leave it be. And this journey I've never stopping searching, yeah, it's